Deep in the Utah desert sits a stretch of land far from any major town. It is isolated by hundreds of miles of empty ground. Long before modern settlers arrived, Native American tribes in the region avoided this specific area. They had a name for the dread and the glowing orbs they observed in the sky. They attributed it to the Skinwalker, a malevolent, shape-shifting entity within their folklore. For nearly a century, outsiders brushed these accounts off as campfire ghost stories. They assumed the intense isolation of the desert was playing tricks on people's minds. The property remained largely unexamined for decades, an unusual pocket of land known only to those who lived nearby. In 1994, the Sherman family purchased the ranch. They were looking for a quiet life raising cattle, unaware of the reports that had defined the area for generations. Their quiet life ended when a massive wolf began stalking their livestock. When the family patriarch fired his rifle at point-blank range, it barely flinched. It absorbed the shots and walked away into the brush. Soon, sightings moved from animals to the environment itself. The family reported seeing glowing blue portals tearing open in the sky, directly above their pastures. The experiences of the Shermans suggested that the old stories weren't just legends. They were dealing with a persistent physical presence that terrified everyone on the property. The nature of the encounters soon shifted from things the family saw to physical remnants left behind in the soil. The family began finding their cattle dead. This placed a financial and psychological strain on the Shermans as their herd was targeted one by one. Unlike the jagged tearing of natural predation, these carcasses were marked by exact surgical incisions. Furthermore, scans revealed no signs of struggle. Investigators found no blood, footprints, or tire tracks anywhere near the bodies. With traditional explanations failing to account for the physical evidence, the ranch became the focus of a new type of study. Billionaire Robert Bigelow saw the events at the ranch as an opportunity to capture empirical data on an active anomaly. Bigelow purchased the property and moved in a private scientific investigation team. They blanketed the property in technology. They installed magnetic sensors, advanced monitoring equipment, and security cameras to watch the ranch 24 hours a day. The goal was to replace anecdotal stories with a process of rigorous data collection. Under Bigelow's direction, the ranch was no longer just a quiet family farm. It became a locked-down, heavily monitored laboratory. The investigation did not disprove the local myths. Instead, Bigelow's team recorded a series of anomalies that they could not explain. The data was significant enough to attract the attention of the United States government. Military intelligence agencies inside the Pentagon began reviewing the records documented in Utah. Following this review, the research was removed from the public domain and labeled as highly classified national security information. This raises questions about why the Defense Department would spend millions of dollars to investigate a location defined by the paranormal. What began as rural folklore eventually resulted in a body of scientific observations significant enough to be buried by the highest powers in the country. In 2007, the United States Department of Defense began funneling millions of dollars into a classified program focused entirely on a single property in Utah, Skinwalker Ranch. The military approached this piece of land like a standard black site. The working theory was that by controlling the perimeter, they could isolate and study the anomalies as if they were locked inside a laboratory. This topological map illustrates the military's initial strategy. They drew a hard perimeter line around a property, operating under the assumption that the phenomena were strictly bound by the geography of the ranch. But the data suggested the phenomena was an interactive force, one that seemed aware of the sensors and the personnel observing it. Treating the ranch as a contained, passive subject was the Pentagon's first operational miscalculation. On the ground, government scientists documented massive physical disturbances. They recorded sudden electrical surges and glowing energy portals opening in the sky directly above the mesa. These atmospheric events were accompanied by sightings of unidentified black creatures that appeared to roam the ridges of the property. To track these movements in total darkness, researchers relied on specialized optical equipment, specifically standard-issue binocular night vision goggles. These tools provided the first measurable evidence of the sightings. By capturing these forms through high-grade optics, the team confirmed they were dealing with physical entities rather than subjective experiences. At this stage, the investigators still believed the threat was localized, a physical mystery that could be solved as long as they stayed within the fences. That belief changed when the phenomenon breached the perimeter. Personnel rotating off the ranch began experiencing what the program called the Hitchhiker Effect. This shift proved that the anomalies were not tied to the land itself, but had instead attached themselves to the researchers. Hundreds of miles away from Utah, researchers reported shadow figures appearing in their homes, manifesting in kitchens and bedrooms far from the ranch's borders. These off-site incidents mirrored the activity on the ranch. Home security cameras distorted and electrical systems malfunctioned, following the same patterns documented at the study site. The Pentagon realized their physical containment strategy was obsolete. A perimeter fence offered no protection against a threat that used the observers as its transport. Facing a breach they couldn't control, officials shut down the program and enforced a strict policy of public denial. That secrecy lasted until 2017. A major leak to the New York Times released military UFO footage and internal files, exposing the program's existence to the world. In less than a decade, the phenomenon had defeated the military's physical boundaries and its final wall of government secrecy. Today, the work continues. Civilian scientists have taken over the investigation, replacing military secrecy with open-source data. Investigators now use automated drone networks and advanced thermal imaging to monitor the property around the clock. This comparison shows the 2007 creature sighting locations alongside a heat map of modern thermal anomalies recorded by civilian teams. There is a direct geographical correlation. The zones of activity documented by the Pentagon decades ago are the same spots generating heat spikes today. But the paradox of measurement remains. Whenever equipment gets close to a significant event, drones malfunction and cameras shut down without explanation. The modern data suggests an intelligence that actively monitors our surveillance methods and adapts to new technologies as soon as they are deployed. From early night vision to advanced drone tracking, Skinwalker Ranch remains a place where the phenomena consistently outpace our efforts to contain or define them. Skinwalker Ranch sits in the Uinta Basin of Utah, a geographical focal point where unexplainable events concentrate with unusual frequency. For decades, the property has been treated as a scientific black box. Researchers and military groups have blanketed the area with sensors and tracking equipment, attempting to capture the phenomenon on hard data. These tracking efforts involved more than just automated cameras. Highly trained military personnel were deployed to witness, track, and log these events. Despite millions of dollars and military-grade observation, the data defies standard aerospace logic. The results refuse to fit within known categories, forcing investigators to abandon traditional scientific frameworks. Investigators established a physical baseline by pinging the airspace with high-powered military radar networks. The monitoring produced erratic results. Systems experienced sudden glitches, and specialized instruments often suffered total failure the moment they were activated. Secondary measures were just as confusing. Infrared cameras captured objects moving at speeds that should be physically impossible, yet these same objects remained invisible to the naked eye. When Navy jets were scrambled to intercept these targets, the objects would accelerate instantly. They moved beyond known physical limits, leaving pursuing aircraft far behind. These recurring instrument failures suggest a physical disruption is occurring in the atmosphere. It creates a scientific crossroads. Is the data measuring a breakdown of physics, or is something else interacting with the act of measurement? The leading explanation for this data is the interdimensional theory. It proposes that the ranch acts as a physical doorway between dimensions. If local space-time distorts above the property, it accounts for the instant acceleration recorded by Navy pilots and infrared cameras. The objects aren't necessarily moving faster, they are traveling through warped space. This model shows the mechanics of a theoretical portal. Localized gravity warps and bends around specific focal points in the atmosphere. Physical objects intersecting this warped gravity field appear to defy physics or vanish from our dimension as they follow the distorted path. This model provides a mathematical framework for the anomalies. It assumes the human observers are seeing things as they are, but that the external reality itself is broken. However, a different theory suggests the anomaly is not occurring in the sky, but directly inside the human brain. Researchers on the property have reported severe mental distress. They describe hallucinating shadows and witnessing the physical geometry of the ranch warp and blur in front of them. This psychological hypothesis views the phenomenon as a localized neuroweapon. It proposes that the environment emits frequencies designed to dismantle human perception. This neuromanipulation causes scientists to mistrust their own instruments. If their perception is being hijacked, the data they collect becomes impossible to verify. The scientific method paralyzes. Investigators reach a point where they cannot determine if they are measuring an external breakdown of spacetime or an internal hijacking of their own minds. There is a final framework that merges both theories, the tribal folklore of an ancient curse and the Skinwalker entity. This theory describes the phenomenon as a conscious ancient force. It reacts with intent, responding specifically to the presence of those who attempt to monitor it. In this view, the phenomenon deploys both physical radar disruption and psychological terror as an active defense. It targets both the sensors and the observers to protect its territory. Skinwalker Ranch exposes the fragility of human technology. Despite all our tracking methods, we are powerless against a force we cannot understand and cannot stop.